Among the numerous birds of the African continent, which fill its vast expanses with beauty and song, there are many that at first glance seem less vivid and vocal. However, this is not entirely true. Upon closer observation, the impressions of the birds are overwhelming because their beauty is special, from the noble sophistication to the stunning uniqueness of a pink sunset. And this is not a metaphor. Anyone who has seen flamingos in the wild will forever retain memories of their unmistakable presence. We will certainly talk about flamingos and others, as we are about to take you on a video journey to meet the aquatic birds of Africa. Among the crane-like birds of the African continent, those belonging to the moorhen family particularly stand out. A typical representative of this family is the red-knobbed coot. At first glance, an astute observer may justifiably note that the plumage of the coot is black, while its specific name suggests a red hue. This is because these birds are so named for their striking red iris. The red-knobbed coot is widespread throughout Eurasia and Australia, and its range also extends to North Africa. These birds inhabit freshwater or brackish water bodies such as lakes, backwaters, river deltas, bays, and estuaries. During the breeding season, the red-knobbed coot tends to avoid fast-flowing streams and deep waters, preferring to nest in shallow areas rich in vegetation like reed, sedge, or bulrush thickets. The coot is a bird with a relatively stocky build, and its body is slightly flattened at the sides. The body length of the coot ranges from 14 to 15 inches, and it weighs between 10 and 17 ounces. Its wingspan is from 27 to 31 inches. The plumage on the head, neck, and upper part of the body is dark gray or entirely black, with a grayish tint on the back. The breast and belly are slightly lighter, smoky gray. On the forehead of the red-knobbed coot, there's a noticeable white fleshy spot. The beak is also white, small, sharp, and laterally compressed. The tail is short, comprising soft feathers of medium length. The legs, with long toes, are yellowish or rich orange. There are no webbed feet, but the sides of the feet have fringed lobes, enabling the birds to be confident swimmers. Coots predominantly lead a sedentary lifestyle, however. Those living in moderate or sharply continental climates often gather in flocks to migrate to warmer regions. Coots swim excellently and are also quite nimble runners on land. While afloat, they rhythmically bob their heads, and to dive, they seem to push themselves out of the water, thus demonstrating the perfect diving technique. Not fussy eaters, red-knobbed coots feed on young shoots of reeds, sweet flags, algae, and grass, supplementing their diet with insects, larvae, snails, tadpoles, and small fish. They are also not averse to human food waste. With the arrival of spring, numerous flocks of coots break up into small groups and engage in courtship displays, after which they form stable mating pairs. Each pair occupies its own nesting territory and vigorously defends it from other waterfowl. During this time, confrontations between two rivals are not uncommon, both among males and females. By the way, birds of opposite sexes never fight each other. Pairs occupying adjacent territories haughtily swim past each other, slightly lifting their wings and fluffing up their feathers. The irritated birds paddle in the water and flap their wings forcefully to rise above their opponent and strike. If neither wants to give way, the rivals resort to a head-on attack and at the last moment take off in a synchronized flight over the water, which often ends in a collision. Sometimes the brawlers dive headfirst and continue their dispute underwater. The losing duelist dives deeper and then hastily retreats from the battlefield. When the skirmishes are left behind and tempers have cooled, it's time for more peaceful pursuits, nest building. For this important avian activity, the pair uses stems and leaves of plants. When everything is finally ready, the females lay their eggs. It's worth noting that the clutch is very rarely left unattended. While one parent sits on the nest, the other swims nearby, vigilantly looking around and warning its partner of approaching predators. Barely dry, the newborn chicks boldly jump from the nest, but in the first days of life, they still return to it to warm up and rest. Soon, the young are permanently on the water, remaining under parental supervision for some time. After 8 weeks, they become fledged and can take fairly good care of themselves independently. For a long time, ornithologists struggled to answer why grebes, also known as great crested grebes, consume their own feathers. Observations indicated that these charming birds begin plucking their plumage when they settle down to rest after feeding. Among bird behavior researchers, there's a hypothesis that grebes improve their digestion this way, with the feathers acting as an adsorbent for undigested remnants. This isn't the only unique trait characteristic of the bird with the rather unflattering name of grebe, especially the great crested variety. It received its species name due to the similarity in the color of its plumage to the appearance of the poisonous mushroom known as the death cap. And that's not all. In times past, these birds were even less flatteringly referred to as devil's divers or water witches. In size, the grebe is slightly larger than a duck, with a body length of about 19.5 inches. It is a bird with a slender neck and an elongated, straight beak. The plumage on its back is brownish-red, while the belly, neck, and head are white. The great crested grebe's spring attire is distinguished by 2 dark tufts of feathers that grow on its head, reminiscent of ears or horns, and a reddish collar appears around its neck. Notably, during the winter period, such feather ornaments disappear from the birds. Either they fall out on their own, or the grebe plucks them out intentionally. Most of the time, these birds stay on the water because they are not very fond of flying, but they should be called excellent divers. The grebe's diet includes fish, amphibians, mollusks, and insects. The mating rituals of grebes deserve special mention. They occur in the water, are quite unusual, and have a strict ritualistic composition. The grebes swim towards each other with their collar feathers fluffed, vigorously shaking their heads and getting close together. Then they straighten up almost vertically in a penguin pose, holding bunches of algae in their beaks, which they offer to each other as a precious gift. When the gifts are gratefully accepted by both givers, the grebes begin to construct their floating nest. These are true water palaces, up to 23 inches wide and a staggering 31 inches tall. Rotten reed or reed serves as the building material. The nest itself greatly resembles a large floating basket. The female lays 3 to 4 eggs in it. The hatched chicks of the great grebe are very inventive, agile, and not at all cowardly. From the first minutes of life, they begin to swim well, and when they are tired or weary of the water procedures, they climb onto the back of the mother and seem to feel quite good about it. The distribution range of the grebe is quite diverse. It spans practically all of Eurasia, Australia, and Tasmania. But Africa is undoubtedly the most reliable and comfortable habitat for these birds. Among the family of waterfowl duck species on the African continent, the Cape shoveler stands out. This duck measures about 21 inches in length and weighs approximately 30 ounces. A distinctive external feature of these birds is their long, spatulate beak. Adult individuals have gray-brown plumage and pale orange legs. While many ducks of the southern hemisphere exhibit no clear sexual dimorphism, the females of the African shoveler have lighter heads than the males, and the pale blue foreparts of their wings are separated from the rich green edging by a white stripe. In short, the Cape shoveler ducks are quite the beauties. It must be said that they are absolutely calm birds. They quack peacefully, swimming unhurriedly through the water, enjoying splashing around and sometimes dipping their heads and necks. They rest just as peacefully on the shores of small bodies of water, dreamily shedding their bright feathers. When hungry, the Cape shoveler heads to open marshes and moist meadows, where it searches for prey on the muddy surface, sometimes swinging its broad bill from side to side, sifting for food, mollusks and crustaceans. Their diet also includes frogs and tadpoles, and they do not shy away from plant food, among which are seeds and shoots of aquatic plants. In a nutshell, they find prey by constantly rummaging in the water. Sometimes the birds do this collectively, stirring up the silt at the bottom of the water body, which contains plenty of delicacies. Shovelers are quite fast in flight and take off from the surface of the water rather easily. Although their seasonal migrations have been modestly studied, experts authoritatively assert that the Cape shoveler is capable of flying distances of more than 1,621 miles without a break. Cape shovelers nest closer to the shallows. They construct their nest in a shallow depression on land, often forming a barrier and a primitive roof out of plants, and lining the inside with down. A clutch can contain from 5 to 12 eggs, which are incubated by the female only. The chicks, as expected, are brave in relation to water, mimic their parents' behavior in everything, and after 8 weeks they embark on their first independent flight. Stilt birds, or stilts, are aptly named for their disproportionately long legs, reminiscent of stilts. These small black and white birds are roughly the size of a pigeon. Their long legs and considerable sharp beaks give the impression that the bird is walking on stilts. During the breeding season, the adult stilt adorns itself in different colors. The top of the head and the back part of the neck change from white to black, while the upper part of the back, the shoulder feathers, and the wings turn black with a distinctive green sheen. The rest of the bird's plumage is white. Outside of the breeding season, the crown and nape change to a gray color. This is also what the young birds look like. They are gray, but their primary feathers have an ochre tint. The length of a stilt's body is about 13 inches, and its wingspan is approximately 33 inches. The bird weighs very little. Stilts have very elegant wings, which they seem to flaunt by occasionally raising them upwards. However, in flight, their red legs protrude beyond the tail, resembling long poles. The bird's long legs are not just a genetic trait. They allow stilts to wade into depths that are inaccessible to other birds. Interestingly, humans have emulated the stilt's unique way of walking. Yes, the principle of stilts is maximally similar, and the inventive human uses them for the same purpose, walking through water. The stilt's thin, elongated beak becomes an effective weapon when it comes to catching insects above the surface of water bodies. Additionally, stilts forage for food from the bottom, completely submerging their head. Their diet consists of larvae, worms, and tadpoles. Stilts commonly inhabit seacoasts, coastal islands, semi-submerged islets, river valleys, hummocky swamps, shallow fresh and brackish lakes, sedimentation ponds, and fish farms. They nest either in separate pairs or small colonies. The stilt's nest is small and neat, only about 6 centimeters high, constructed from twigs and grass. The inside of the nest cup is carefully and delicately lined with down. A clutch usually consists of 4 eggs, which have a fine red-brown speckle. Interestingly, stilts use their long beaks to arrange the eggs with a sharper end towards the middle of the nest, and always pay close attention to this geometry. Stilts are known for their attentive parental care, which plays a vital role in the development and survival of their chicks. After a stilt egg is incubated by both the male and the female for approximately 24 days, the chicks hatch in a rather vulnerable state. However, despite their initial helplessness, the characteristic long, thin legs of the species can already be discerned. After hatching, the chicks are provided with constant care and an ample supply of food by their parents. This dedicated care ensures that the young birds grow quickly. Remarkably, within just a month, stilt chicks develop enough to be independent, displaying rapid growth and the ability to fend for themselves. The precocial nature of these birds means that although they are born relatively underdeveloped, they are mobile and able to leave the nest shortly after hatching. They are soon able to feed with their parents, which helps them gain the strength and skills needed for an independent life. This ability to become self-sufficient in such a short period is crucial for their survival, especially in environments where predation risks and the need to migrate may soon become factors in their lives. The gray heron is one of the most widespread wetland birds, not only in Africa but throughout Europe with a temperate climate as well. Among other members of the heron family, it can be easily identified by its slender body and lush ash-gray plumage. The origin of the name heron traces back to an ancient Roman myth about the city of Ardea, which was burned to the ground by barbarians, and from its ashes, the heron was said to have emerged. This bird is considered by many cultures to be a symbol of the sun, peace, and spiritual awakening. Traditionally, the gray heron has been seen as an emblem of success, and encountering one is regarded as a good omen. The gray heron is a fairly large bird. Its body length can reach almost 3 feet, with a wingspan of 5 to 6.5 feet, and it can weigh up to 4.5 pounds. The species name is tied to its characteristic ash-gray feathers on the neck, back, and wings. On its sides, the heron features broad black stripes, and its belly and undertail are light gray. The head of the gray heron is white, and adorned with black feathers that start at the eyes, stretch to the neck, and form a crest. Like other birds of its family, the gray heron has a long yellow beak, which is used not only for feeding, but also for expressing emotions, whether it be courtship during mating season or displaying threats to enemies. The legs of the gray heron are brown and stilt-like, allowing it to move comfortably through marshy terrain. The bird's habitat range is quite extensive, covering many countries of Europe and Asia. For wintering, gray herons fly to Anatolia, Africa, or the Balkans. They typically settle near bodies of water, rivers, lakes, swamps, bays, estuaries, and coastal areas. They nest in tall trees and shrubs, always near water. Gray herons use the same nest from season to season, renewing it each year. To build their nests, they use branches, dry grass, or reeds, twigs, and roots. The male collects the building materials, while the female, like a true homemaker, arranges the abode, spruces it up a bit, and tries to make it cozy. Each time, the birds renovate their old home, which results in it becoming larger and larger. Weather conditions indeed affect the behavior of the gray heron. These birds tend to sleep more when it gets cool, especially when there's a piercing wind. Like most members of the heron family, they can stand motionless on one leg for extended periods. Gray herons fly relatively slowly, reaching speeds of up to 30 miles per hour. In flight, they distinctively bend their necks into the shape of the English letter SS, which distinguishes them from storks and cranes that fly with straight necks. Fish is a favorite meal for herons. When hunting fish, they stand motionless in the water, waiting for their prey to come within striking distance of their sharp beak. Sometimes the heron manages to practically spear it. Their diet also includes snakes, frogs, crustaceans, small mammals, and insects. Gray herons are somewhat predatory because they do not hesitate to catch and eat the ducklings of other birds. It is noteworthy that gray herons often hunt in the moonlight, creating an enchanting sight, as their gray coloration takes on a special, mystical glow. However, most often, gray herons search for food during the day near water, sometimes tirelessly pacing meadows for hours in search of prey. Gray herons have few natural enemies. Typically, only foxes hunt them. Crows and buzzards also cause quite a bit of trouble for herons because they steal their eggs and chicks. However, herons suffer most from human activity, which destroys and pollutes their natural habitat. During the breeding season, solitary gray herons form colonies, most often seen in tall trees near water. Males arrive first, choosing a place for the future nest or returning to renew an old home. They then attract females with piercing cries. It should be said that male gray herons are very fussy about their mates. They may peck at or even chase away a female that does not suit them or disappoints them with her behavior. Once a suitable partner is found, the males perform a complex courtship dance, characterized by graceful wing movements. In a sign of mutual affection, the male and female adorn each other with stalks of grass or twigs. Subsequently, the female lays 2 to 5 eggs and begins to incubate them. Both parents feed the hatched chicks. The fluffy yellow-beaked young are often unruly in the nest. The chicks are quite aggressive toward their siblings. Some nest tyrants unhesitatingly push out potential rivals for a larger share of food and attention. Surprisingly, the parents often indulge in this behavior. Young birds leave the parental nest about 50 days after hatching. However, they will remain fully dependent on their parents' care for about 2.5 months. By the next breeding season, the juveniles will be ready to create their own pairs. It has turned out that seagulls in general, and the kelp gull in particular, are often said to be brazen, persistent, and not at all shy in choosing methods for finding food. Well, perhaps there is some truth to this, as each of us has observed the behavior of seagulls while on vacation. Get a little distracted, and they will steal your favorite treats. But is it worth getting angry at the birds for this? Probably not. They behave as they can because their behavior is determined by nature. Regarding the kelp gull, which we will discuss, it is quite a large bird. The length of its body reaches 24 inches, and the wingspan is quite large, 49 inches. The plumage of the head, neck, belly, and tail is white. Only the back and the primary feathers of the bird's wings are colored black. The gull's beak is long with a red spot underneath. The color of the legs can be either saturated yellow or olive green. Kelp gulls feed mainly on fish, mollusks, snails, and crustaceans, and are very fond of feasting on the scraps of other bird colonies. However, it turns out that the list of this menu is far from the only food for gulls. Researchers from the University of Miami once published observations of kelp gulls and found that among these birds there are intentions to hunt for the pups of seals. Before attacking, a flock of gulls consisting of 5-7 individuals mercilessly pecks out their eyes. Blinding the victim, the kelp gulls continue to attack. Such unsportsmanlike, let's say, the behavior of the kelp gulls is not an unsubstantiated story of a passerby. These are testimonies of naturalists published in the African Journal of Marine Science. As Yahoo News writes, citing the scientific publication, scientists had predicted the conflict between the seals living on the coast of Namibia and the gulls 25 years ago. Both predators hunt for fish. Over the last 15 years, the number of the seal population has grown rapidly. If in 1998 there were only about 100 individuals living on the coast, then by 2020, during the breeding and parenting period, from 20 to 80,000 adult seals gather here. Of course, this deprives the gulls of their usual food, and they significantly feel the food deficit. Moreover, as scientists claim, seal pups are easier prey than fish, which requires certain efforts during hunting. According to researchers' observations, kelp gulls attack small seals when the adults go hunting. How do they do it? It's all very simple. One of the gulls cunningly pecks out the eyes of the seal. After that, the other birds attack the helpless animal, starting with its softest tissues in the underbelly. As terrible as this may look, scientists note this is just natural selection. Nothing can be done about it. And the gulls choose a quite successful survival tactic. That's how it goes. Mating forces kelp gulls to form colonies, the location of which is always as close to the water as possible. The nest is built in a shallow pit right on the ground. There is almost no aesthetic appeal to it, except that it is somewhat lined with shells, bones, and their own feathers. 2 to 3 eggs are laid, from which chicks hatch, possessing one highly developed instinct above all the demand to be fed. The parents cope well with their duties, and within 4 weeks, the gull chicks are well versed in the rules of survival in the wild. One of the representatives of the aquatic birds on the African continent is the great cormorant. Without any doubt, the bird got its specific name due to the white plumage of the keel part of the body and neck. The great cormorant is quite a large bird because the length of an adult male can reach 31 to 39 inches and its wingspan is more than 5 feet. The neck and chest of the bird are exclusively white, and the whiter the area becomes as the cormorant ages. This bird is almost the only representative of the cormorant family found in Africa, south of the Sahara, preferring freshwater bodies on the west coast from Cape Verde to Guinea-Bissau, and from Angola to the Cape of Good Hope and Mozambique. Great cormorants are extremely adapted to the aquatic environment. Their appearance eloquently states that these birds are unmatched fishermen. Cormorants have elongated bodies and necks, a thin, long beak that is pointed at the end and resembles a fishhook in shape. The beak is capable of opening very wide, allowing cormorants to swallow relatively large fish. Underwater, the birds use their strong hind limbs with toes connected by a broad membrane as a propeller. The legs of the cormorants fit tightly together and are retracted backward, and the bird's thighs are equipped with large, strong muscles. Cormorants can remain submerged for long periods and descend to considerable depths. In search of food, they can dive up to 50 feet deep and stay underwater for about 2 minutes. The eyes of these birds have a transparent nictitating membrane, which makes them excellent divers. In case of danger, great cormorants swim underwater, leaving only their head and neck above the surface. While in the water, great cormorants are incredibly agile and adept, however. On land, they are quite clumsy, where they are awkward and move heavily. Even though these birds spend most of their lives in the water, it is still unclear why the feathers of such a skilled swimming bird are not waterproof and get wet very quickly. That is why after hunting, the birds usually sit on stones and spread their wings. This is how they dry their feathers and warm up, since they quickly get cold in the cool water. Great cormorants are known for their huge colonies. In some places, about 2,000 birds nest together, and sometimes there are 10 or more nests on one tree. Colonies of cormorants that remain on some coasts for the winter or settle there permanently create problems for local residents. The fact is that a large congregation of these birds on one body of water significantly reduces the number of fish in it, as an adult cormorant needs to eat up to 18 ounces of fish per day. That's at the very least. Therefore, it is quite understandable that the issue of controlling the number of cormorants with a good appetite is topical. Mostly their diet includes small or medium-sized fish, capelin, anchovies, herring, or sardine. However, they also eat mollusks, crustaceans, frogs, insects, sea turtles, and even snakes. Great cormorants build their nests out of branches and leaves at the tops of trees or on gentle slopes. They nest in colonies, sometimes joining families of seagulls, penguins, and terns. A clutch can have up to 6 eggs. The newborn chicks of great cormorants are naked and helpless. They are covered with their first feathers only after 30–80 days, depending on the species. But even after that, parents often continue to feed them until they start their own family. They call it the bird of the sunset. The flamingo is the unrivaled beauty of nature, created with special finesse. The unique combination of pink color and grace of these creatures is enchanting. Since ancient times, people have considered flamingos to be mythical beings, inspiring the most cherished dreams. In nature, there is no more captivating spectacle than the simultaneous takeoff of a 500,000 flock of flamingos. It truly charms. To us, they are a drop of exoticism in the whirlpool of the interesting and unusual in the world. However, flamingos are not only pink, although it is thanks to such plumage they are known all over the world. The flamingo's way of life is inextricably linked with water. They favor large salt lakes, sea bays, and estuaries. The flamingo's appearance is, of course, very notable. Relative to body size, these are birds with the longest legs and necks on Earth. It's possible that such distinctive features of the birds arose as a way to cool the head by maximally lifting it above the surface of the warm ground layer of air in Africa. The birds' bodies are large, approximately the size of a goose, with long legs, and the tarsus is 3 times longer than the shin. The bird weighs up to 9 pounds. Its length is 35-62 inches, and the wingspan reaches up to 65 inches. Sexual dimorphism is not pronounced. The flamingo's neck is curved, thin, flexible, and longer than that of a swan. It contains 19 vertebrae, the last of which is part of the spinal bone. The bird's head is small. The red-brown beak with a mandatory black tip is massive, and in the middle part is wedge-shaped, bending downwards. On the edges of the upper beak and the fleshy tongue, there are small, horny plates and teeth-like structures, which create an important sieving apparatus for the birds. Under the skin of the neck, the flamingo has an air sac divided into lobes, serving as a resonator. The voice of these birds is loud, coarse, and somewhat reminiscent of the cackling of domestic geese. The toes on their feet are short, with blunt claws, 3 of which are directed forward and connected by a well-developed webbing. The hind toe is small and located higher on the foot. It is characteristic for flamingos to stand on one leg, and it must be said that this requires absolutely no effort from them. By pressing the second leg to the belly, these birds reduce heat loss from the wind, which noticeably cools their unfeathered limbs. The bird's tail is short, as are the wings. The structure of the flamingo's contour feathers is the same as that of storks. The secretion of the uropygial gland does not prevent the feathers from getting wet quickly. Despite this, flamingos can stay on the water for a long time and swim well. However, flamingos sleep in trees and they cannot fall from the tree in their sleep. When they fall asleep, the toes reflexively grip the branch very tightly, so the sleep of these pink beauties is surprisingly peaceful. The color of their plumage is primarily pink, ranging from delicate to rich and even red. The wingtips of flamingos are always black. The pink and red coloration of the feathers and skin is due to the presence of fat-soluble coloring pigments, lipochromes, in the tissues. The birds obtain these substances from their food, mainly from small crustaceans. This is probably why the white crystalline crust of the lakes where flamingos live also takes on a pink hue. There are bare patches on the birds' heads, a narrow ring around the eye, the cere, and the chin. Interestingly, in captivity, the pink-red hue of the plumage usually disappears after 1-2 years due to a monotonous diet. However, if the flamingos are kept appropriately and red carotenoids are added to their feed, the bird's coloration will always be attractively pink. Flamingos feed in shallow water with muddy bottoms, filtering the water with their beak. Small crustaceans, mollusks, fly larvae, as well as algae and seeds of certain plants make up the main diet of flamingos. While feeding, flamingos submerge their heads in water, suck in water using their beaks, and sift out the nutritious substances they eat, while the water exits through the upper beak. Tiny hair-like filters help to separate the food and release the water. One study showed that a special buoyancy organ supporting the bird's head allows it to feed by inverting its head and keeping it on the water surface. Flamingos are not monogamous birds, and they nest in large colonies that can number several hundred or even thousands of pairs. Birds build their nests from clay or mud in the shape of a cone-like structure. A clutch consists of 1 to 3 eggs, which are carefully guarded and incubated by the female. The chicks are born well-developed, active, and leave the nest after a few days. It's hard to believe, but parents feed young flamingos with crop milk. This substance is secreted by special glands in the throats of adult birds, and its nutritional content can be compared to the milk of mammals. Chicks feed on this food for 2 months until their beaks grow enough for them to be able to filter food from the water independently. At the age of 2.5 months, young flamingos reach the size of adult birds and become fledged. The herring gull is considered one of the most numerous representatives of the Charadriiformes order. Its habitat is so broad that most ornithologists are confident in the existence of not just one, but several closely related species. The herring gull prefers the cool latitudes of the northern hemisphere. In the winter months, these birds move to Florida, the southern part of China, Japan, and the coast of the African continent. Since the herring gull depends on aquatic food sources, it settles in coastal areas. The bird chooses mountainous terrain, cliffs, and rocky gorges, though it sometimes feels quite comfortable in marshlands as well. This bird has adapted perfectly to coexist with humans, confidently settling in large metropolises and boldly building nests on the roofs of high-rise buildings. The herring gull is a large bird. Its length averages about 21-25 inches. The weight ranges from 2 to 3.5 pounds. The wingspan is 51-59 inches. The head, neck, and body of the bird are covered with white plumage, while the wings and back have a silvery color. The gull's yellow beak is compressed at the sides and curved like a hook, and underneath it, a distinct red spot is visible. Around the eyes, which have a gray-colored iris, there are narrow rings of yellow skin. Interestingly, the herring gull acquires its characteristic plumage only in the 4th year of life. Before that, young individuals have mottled coloring with brown and gray shades predominating. The feathers begin to lighten and become silvery after the bird reaches 2 years of age. Herring gulls are capable of producing a wide range of characteristic sounds. They can cluck, caw, honk, howl, laugh, cry, and even meow. Gulls are colonial birds. Their communities can number hundreds of pairs. Sometimes smaller or mixed colonies are encountered. Each pair has its own carefully guarded territory. If an external enemy attacks one of them, the entire colony unites to protect its kin. However, when there are no external threats, neighboring pairs often conflict with each other due to their unbearable bird character. The herring gull is considered highly organized. Complex relationships between members of the species are based on a strict hierarchy. Only males occupy the dominant position. Females are allowed to dominate only in matters concerning the choice of location for nesting. These birds are monogamous. They form a strong pair once and for life. The relationships within the pair are very peculiar, especially during the mating period. At this time, the attentive male performs ritual feeding of his partner. The selfless female sits near the nest and begins to whine thinly, plaintively begging the male for food. He obediently fulfills her whims. What wouldn't one do for the best among gulls? On cliffs, rocky shores, or among dense thickets, the herring gull responsibly constructs its nest. Stones spread out in a circle serve as the foundation. For decor, the birds use grass, tree branches, moss, dry seaweed, and feathers as building materials. Both males and females participate in construction, strictly maintaining a distance of about 5 meters between neighboring nests. Typically, the female lays 2 to 4 eggs, colored in a greenish-brown or olive hue with large dark spots. Both parents take part in incubating the eggs. During shifts, they carefully and cautiously turn the eggs. After the 4-week incubation period, chicks are born. Their small bodies are covered in gray, down with distinct dark spots. The parents are very responsible when it comes to feeding the young, taking turns tirelessly flying to fetch the chick's favorite treat fish. Within 2 days, the chicks can stand on their own, and a few days later, they begin to leave the nest, not straying far. In case of danger, the chicks hide in the nest and freeze as if lifeless. The gulls begin to fly no earlier than 1.5 months old. It should be noted that the herring gull is not picky about food at all. It will eat anything it can swallow. The gull will be a constant visitor both at fishing boats and at dumps. On the shores, herring gulls catch larvae, insects, lizards, and small rodents. They can also eat berries, fruits, nuts, roots, and grains. And they don't shy away from stealing prey from smaller and weaker kin. That is, they simply steal. The birds often circle over the water's surface, looking for victims. If the prey is covered by a protective shell, the herring gull soars high into the air and drops it onto rocks. Thus, the shell cracks open, and the gull just has to collect the tasty insides. In conclusion, it should be noted that the herring gull is not accustomed to mincing words with people. It often aggressively attacks those who try to inconvenience it. The gull will beat its wings, scream, and, at the first opportunity, peck painfully at a person's face. There are many cases where brazen birds directly on the street have snatched food from the hands of passers-by. Well, we must remain patient and attentive and learn to forgive the birds for their excessive boldness. In turn, they repay us 100-fold by beautifying our imperfect world with their existence. Without them, winged and noisy, it would not be so gorgeous.